Michelle?
Daniel,
OG
OG
Rose?
Rose, and today we're talking about wisdom can't be handed off. The paper will make a distinction between handed off and handed down. And basically, the short piece is going to be getting into the differences between knowledge and wisdom. With knowledge being more technological, I guess you could put it this way. Knowledge would be about the exercise machine, these different technologies, where wisdom would actually be the practices of getting better health. So they can exist together, they can have something to do with one another. But the problem also is that technology kind of naturally gets better with time. The previous generation hands it off to us like a baton in a race, and we just kind of just pick up where they left off. We don't, and I mean, you just kind of look and you see how a car works. It's there, it presents itself in reality. You just look and there are cars. And also, because cars present themselves that way and all your friends are using them, then you're kind of automatically convinced that it's valuable. You know it has use and you can see how it's used. And yeah, you might have to do some driving lessons, but they're pretty straightforward on what you need to do. So knowledge kind of presents itself like that, as something that just in your experience of it kind of confirms its value, says what it does and stuff like that. So it's handed off. But wisdom, philosophy, theology, discernment, judgment, humility, epistemology, all these different things. I'm yet to see epistemology walking down the street. I am yet to ever see a large group of people in one place at one time who value it, who kind of confirm that it has use. There are things, wisdom is handed down. It is not something that's just given. It doesn't present itself in reality as self-evidently valuable, and it certainly doesn't present itself sort of showing you how you should use it. I mean, philosophy is always asking, what is philosophy? Even philosophy gets into is randomly asking questions to remind itself, what is it about? Deleuze has a book, What is Philosophy? You can go through so many, thinkers on that. So every generation has to relearn wisdom because it's handed down. They have to relearn discernment and judgment and humility and morals and ethics and so on. It's not handed off. You don't just automatically get it by being born in the future. It has to be handed down.
Yeah, no, I like the imagery a lot. The idea of, handed off like a baton.
Yeah.
Like if you're doing a race, you hand off the baton, but you really don't have to do anything with that baton exactly. Like you just at least hold it and you run with it.
Yeah, it's
so
self-evident what you need
you
to
exist
do.
with
Yeah,
it now,
yeah.
Whereas like the idea of the handed down wisdom, it is much more like, you get a book, you have to actually open it, and wisdom is
Yeah.
often associated with
books.
with,
Yeah.
with books. So yeah, the idea of even before people even read widely, oral tradition, there's something about the listening and the hearing, and that really does seem to be something that wisdom falls more into. Now you do receive knowledge through people communicating, of course.
Yeah, data, facts, and that's
Right.
the knowledge matters.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that has a place, absolutely. But the thing is that it's like the space of wisdom is actually opening us back up to very much the conversation, like the back and forth, the questions. The what does this mean? Because a book you read, but you also have to then figure out
You
what
have to
it
interpret.
means.
You have to think about it. You have
Exactly.
to work on
Exactly.
it. Yeah, and I mean, we're using wisdom as a broad category here and have a paper on that. But
Yeah.
if we're talking about to discern when someone is hurt, but they're trying to hide it, to discern when you're in the wrong, but you think you're in the right, like these abilities to discern situations, to read people, to read different things, all of those are skills and abilities that would fall under the umbrella of things that you don't just know by being born, that don't just present themselves as self-evident. I mean, problematically, you tend to actually think it's self-evident, what people are thinking, what you should do, and that's what can get you into trouble, because often that is just defined in terms of your personality type or different things. But previous generations thought about empathy. They thought about discernment. They thought about what does it mean to love your neighbor? Who is your neighbor? All these different questions. And there's a tradition, a wisdom, yes, usually in books that they handed down to us. But books don't just drive down the road. Books don't just you don't go to work and you're not forced to read a book. Usually you're forced to use your laptop, you're forced to use your email and different things. So wisdom is not presented to you in just your daily life as there. And
Yeah, it's very strange. I just thought this like images you were talking about, like somebody with like book hands. And like you need these books in order to make your coffee. Like you can't make your coffee without these books.
It's like crab hands, like the little claw book hands. Yeah, you make your
but
coffee.
it's I guess what I mean to say though is like there's something that's strangely not physical. Like there's nothing about there's something about wisdom that is actually extremely physical in a sense, because it's so pertinent to living like, you know, a better life. But it's not like you can't use it like a car or like certain technologies which, like you're saying, you know, are invented, and therefore we just get to have cars now because people invented
they're just there. You see them. I mean, you almost can't help but
and they come
learn
with
how to use
manuals.
them.
Like that was a thing I thought it was another really great point, that they come with manuals. You know, so like it's not like marriages come with manuals that are so specific because you've got you know, two extraordinarily unique individuals that are now being
I mean, and another way too is if you didn't know how to use the lawnmower, it wouldn't start. It would present itself in its thingness as telling you you don't know what you're doing, and so you would have to figure it out. But if you go into a conversation with your spouse and you have no idea what you're saying and your premises are wrong and you're being judgmental, it's not like the conversation won't happen.
So it just blows up.
It's not like the conversation just like blows up or freezes, or the door, you know, into the living room won't open. You can still go into the conversation, and you know, obviously it's a generality because there's plenty of technologies you can use if you don't know how to use, and they'll get you killed or something. You know, it would be bad. But generally speaking, a technology kind of.
Well, like if it doesn't work, it's not doing anything. It's like
it won't work.
It's not working.
But if a conversation doesn't,
very well.
But if the conversation's not working, it's still going on. It doesn't stop.
It's a sustained death.
It's bad, and so, but you see, of course, the very problem is though, precisely because when you look around and see all the technology around you and it's more advanced and so on and so forth, there's something about technology, and obviously we're alluding to Heidegger's work in technology and so on. Well, there's something about knowledge, because, and also with knowledge, like we're just saying Wikipedia is there. Another way to associate knowledge is the data, and we can just look up data so easily on our phone. So it feels like we have all the knowledge, and it generally is. It's handed down to us. We don't have to relook. We don't have to investigate and learn all these facts. They've been amassed over the centuries by experts into Wikipedia or the internet, right? So facts are handed down, if we make it like facts, but are handed off, not handed down. But truths, which are more wisdom, which are more the meaning of those facts, what to do with those facts, are handed down. But you see, facts feel like wisdom. Knowledge feels like wisdom. And so we think we're wiser. We think we have a better understanding of the truth because the very experience of increased facts makes us feel like we have increased wisdom, which you would have to have wisdom in order to discern isn't the same thing. So there's this problem here. So there's also this kind of
self-concealing.
There's this self-concealing, and there's this problem too where it's almost more difficult with time to tell that facts are not wisdom, because facts get more advanced, you get more of them, technology gets more back, so your entire environment is kind of saying to you, if you make this conflation, you are wiser. And so you think you're better at your marital conversations. You think you're better at dealing with life's biggest questions. You think you're able to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, it's kind of like with, you know, the paper says about the health example. You know, it's like, well, nobody can pass down the fact that you exercise, you know.
Right.
Maybe you have like some nutrients that like are passed on,
obviously, some knowledge
through
about
maternal
health,
to infant in a sense. That's kind of a foundational nutrients that maybe you have there. But the sustenance of that, right? The cultivation really is only what you can do that. Only a person can do that. And I do, in a way, I do kind of think, because I think about children, obviously our children, and like they're so curious, you know. So I do think if there's any way in which we're kind of already we are born with the curiosity, which I think can lead us into the wisdom.
Sure.
But see, I think unfortunately sometimes, I mean, I hope and pray we cultivate that for them and just encourage those questions. But I think that sometimes knowledge actually, what it was interesting is like, it's almost like those questions are met with knowledge versus just fanning the flames of those questions or like encouraging those questions. Because I think part of wisdom is actually to always ask questions. That's so important, because if you don't, like in the paper is like, if you don't ask the question of, wait, what might be beyond this knowledge. Not that that knowledge is not correct, but there might be something beyond that knowledge, or behind that knowledge, or something further to reach. I think what happens, unfortunately, sometimes, or a risk with knowledge too, which again, knowledge is still important, but you kind of have to kind of move. You continue to have it, but you kind of move through it too. It's kind of like a seed. Like the seed's still there, like the roots, it becomes roots, but like you have to actually, the plant has to emerge from too, and then grow. But basically, the questions I think for questions to continue, knowledge can sometimes stop questions in a way. Because it's kind of like, well, it's settled, these are the answers, and this is the knowledge. And so it can almost, unfortunately, defeat the progression into wisdom, or the in tandem progression. Maybe it's even happening at the same time into wisdom. So
I mean, you get that problem Daniel Pink and Drive discussing intrinsic motivation, extrinsic motivation. We get trained to do things for rewards, and when the rewards aren't there, we don't do them, which is of course problematic, because a lot of creativity and growth happens with intrinsic motivation, where you're doing it for its own sake. And you see a lot of the rewards of wisdom are not self-evident immediately after the act of learning it. There's not an immediate feedback loop. You just have to know that you learn this in 2014, it becomes very valuable in 2016 or something, or in different situations. When wisdom becomes value is not always quickly, it's not immediately there, but there's a much quicker feedback with, say, using technology. You turn the wheel of your car to your right, it immediately goes to the right. You turn to the left, it immediately goes to the left. You go to Wikipedia, you instantly learn something interesting. There can be a dopamine rush, different things like that. So there could be, with knowledge, more external motivations that are a problem. And also what ends up happening is, in capitalism, knowledge is associated with that, like knowledge is value. It's good to have knowledge because of its use, because of what you can do with it. And so you have these very, like, you learn a task at a job in order to do the task and get it done, so to be complete with it. But wisdom entails, like, wisdom is not, the subject of wisdom is your life. And so the use of wisdom is not over until you die, and death is not a thing in life, so you never experience that end point. But there actually is an end point to it. It's just when you die, and so
and you do feel it.
Yes. Oh, sure. But you see, since knowledge has this experience of a much quicker feedback loop, and also it's much more tangible. If you get knowledge of how to, say, optimize your search engine, or search engine optimization, you get metrics pretty quickly, and you can get metrics to figure it out, right? That you've used that knowledge, you can see if it works, and you get your feedback and you adjust accordingly. Well, with wisdom, let's say you get the wisdom of how to navigate a personal situation that is difficult, and you fix it. Well, everyone could suppose that it would have been fixed without that wisdom, that it would have worked out without it. It's more difficult to falsify. There's always a sense of which it maybe wasn't needed, because you can never know for sure in an alternative universe how things would have unfolded had that wisdom not be present in the personal conflict situation. Where there's no doubt at all that when you search engine optimize, for example, that your website is getting more traffic because you search engine optimized. It's much more direct. So there's a lot of things stacked against wisdom, where if we only value, you're talking about wisdom cultivating curiosity. Well, we don't, as a society, necessarily value curiosity unless it has a clear, linear result, and certainly if it doesn't give something to the market. And where wisdom doesn't know how to do that, we don't know how to price it. We don't know how to value it. And so we'll talk a big game. We'll say wisdom, that's important.
Or like curiosity.
That's great. And then proceed to spend all of our free time and interest in a manner that can't possibly cultivate these things. That's why words are often red herrings. When you ask people, what do you believe and what do you think? What they tell you is that it tends to be more in the service of ideology preservation, or making people feel like they believe a certain thing, as opposed to they actually believe it. And I'm afraid that wisdom is often a victim of that human tendency.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think too, with like you're saying, this idea of like, well, we can know that we're, quote unquote, more advanced because we've got like airplanes, for example, and it's like, well, that's because there's been all this time, we've had all of this progression. I think though that's why wisdom is so humbling, and why it's so important. We need it. We need to be humbled, and we need it to remind us of of kind of the we all have very small beginnings, and how those small beginnings can become great things, but we have to cultivate them. Like, we've got to do the work of really pressing in and tending, right? Like tending and maintaining what those seedlings of curiosity and questions, and then the wisdom itself. And another thing too is, like, you don't know, like, what. So the idea of a happy marriage, for example, even to the reason why wisdom is harder too is, like, that really could look. Yes, there are general things, but that are going to be common to what that means for people, but it also can mean very different things for people.
Oh yeah,
you know what
that's
I mean?
right.
And that's what's hard about wisdom, is that it's not like, yes, there are certain things about it that could be true for most people, or for all people maybe even, but there's also a lot that is this recognition of, like, just the fact that it is a constant kind of, like I said, conversation. It's a constant kind of seeking.
It's
you
very
can't
conditional.
pinpoint it always for. Yeah, it's very specific. It's knowledge is general, wisdom is specific. I think that that would be fair.
And the irony is, if we tend to associate something truer with if it's more general and universal, well, then we're actually saying something is truer if it is more abstract, when all any of us ever live is in a particular specific world. Wisdom is very, very particular. It's kind of like cooking. It's also kind of like art. It's more of an art form, and art form is kind of like cooking, right? I mean, you taste it, you say, oh, it needs a little salt, but if you put all salt in it, it would be terrible. There's a balance of elements. There's a timing. There's a there's ingredients, there's stirring, there's methods, there's all these different things that have to be balanced. In the same way, a good story is not all action, but it's also not all quiet time. It's not. There's a balance of character, a balance of dialogue. There's this kind of balance of things. And so wisdom entails a lot of sort of weighing situations, balancing elements, trying to empathize with different signs, see it from different points of view to try to figure things out. Where, generally speaking, if we're just talking about knowledge, well, and then by extension technology generally has a linear function. The car is to get from the driveway to the mailbox. It's very linear. There's not, what do you need to balance? What elements do you need to weigh? It either gets there or it doesn't. You press the pedal and you make it go there. And so, wisdom has something more, like we're saying, art form, more like cooking, more of an art form disposition, where technology is more of, where knowledge is more technical. It's technical knowledge, I guess, with Heidegger. And we've been captured to think of everything. Well, we've been captured to think that we only understand something if we understand it in technical terms, where we can break it down and therefore use its energy, use its potential to accomplish a task. And you've lost the entire tradition of understanding that is observing, kind of honoring it, like observing it and taking it in and learning from it, believing there's some wisdom to be gained.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the point too about with Heidegger, with the idea of technology, it really does our thinking for us.
Yeah, we've outsourced to it.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the other risk too. Like you mentioned it already, but I think it can be stressed again, emphasized again here, that knowledge is not actually thinking.
No.
There might be some aspect. Obviously, there's some element of your brain working.
Sure, of course.
To comprehend or whatever, acquiesce the knowledge, but there's no active improvisational.
It's very responsive. It's more responsive thinking, or you're just responding to things.
True. I think that, but I feel like wisdom is actually more in a dance, more responsive.
It depends on how you use the term. Sure, I mean, you could be outsourced, like you're just reacting versus responding.
That would maybe be a good way to put that.
Yeah, you're reacting to your environment,
Yeah.
the signals of your environment. You're just outsourcing it. You're letting the world do your thinking for you. Your technology.
Right, exactly. Your technology and the knowledge, and therefore it's not. You have thoughts now, but you're not necessarily thinking. It's not like improvisational.
That's interesting. You have thoughts, but you're not thinking.
Yeah, you have thoughts, but you're not thinking.
Huh. Yeah.
So it's and like the paper says about this kind of complete sets. It's like it's already just these made things that here it's almost like I'm holding a big those like building blocks that kids play with.
Yeah,
really cool. They're like really light, but they look like bricks. I love them. I love it. So it's like you have like a stack of 5, and I just give them to you. That's what like knowledge can feel like.
Oh sure. Oh sure.
Instead of like knowledge, I think there's something about wisdom that's almost like making stuff by hand.
Oh yeah,
like if you were to,
crafting.
yeah,
Art
like
form,
if you
craft.
had like, here's your cardboard, Dan, like go ahead and make these bricks. You like seeing what you're kind of trying to make and then doing it yourself. There's just something that seems to be about like that, actually making it.
I mean,
that
there's
feels
definitely
like wisdom versus the just literally here's the bricks and you're like, okay, you don't know, like you don't exactly know, like, and that's where I think the questions of why, you know, and that's why I think people who, it's funny, I think sometimes people who are often seen as like difficult, quote unquote difficult, or like challenging or whatever, it's like, well, yes, maybe they're just doing that though because they're trying to get behind the knowledge. You know, they're saying like, well, what are these bricks? Why do I have to hold them? Why are you passing them to me? Da 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 da. You know, just kind of like, well, just take the bricks. You know, this is good for you. Just take. Well, but it's actually really important to acknowledge and see the value in the questions and to say, oh, that's good. Why are we passing these bricks around, by the way? You know, and what is the wisdom behind the knowledge? Because I think there is some connection with like, the knowledge is should be being shared, I suppose, because of something having to do with wisdom, right? Or do you think that they can? I mean, I think they probably can be parsed completely, though.
Well, I mean, wisdom is always going to be about subjects of which can be understood in terms of data and knowledge. You know, it's like, I guess, Wittgenstein, the world is everything that is the case, you know, the sum total collection of facts, where we could say, well, wisdom is the understanding of what to do with everything that is the case, how to navigate everything that is the case.
And why everything that is the case is the case.
What we were saying, we could tell the difference between the truth and the absolute. The truth being the everything is the case, you know, the absolute being everything that is the case, plus the subject, plus the consciousness, plus the person, you know. So, you know, wisdom is where you're taking the subject very seriously, whereas knowledge, as we're understanding it here, is merely the presentation of everything that is the case, the facts, but that doesn't tell you what you should do with them. That's why, but it feels like they do, because they're presented in your reality with a kind of self-evidentness of how they should be operated. A car presents itself in its very physicality with a sense of how it should be used and what you should do with it, and that it is valuable, and that it is worth getting. You know, it brings with you a sort of, how could you possibly question that this is good and that you should use it and that it can be used? Whereas wisdom is, where can wisdom be found, is the old phrase, right? You know, the Harold Bloom named one of his books of that. Where is wisdom to be found? Well, it's invisible because it's an art form. It's not a thing. I mean, I guess you could say a book, but you get exactly what you said. A book has to be opened. You know, it has to be read. It does not tell you what it says. Yeah. Be nice if it did. Maybe an audiobook, I guess. You know, an audiobook tells you what it says.
Don't give away my secrets.
You know, if you can find that nice voice.
Yeah, right.
But no, so wisdom is a kind of art form. But of course the problem is, if you are led to believe like that personal problems can be solved with just the right technologies, you know, and, you know, well, you know, if we watch Netflix, we're not arguing, right?
Yes,
and you had, what'd you say about play?
Yeah, I was going to bring that up, actually, because the idea of, okay, so, you know, I said the phrase, we have thoughts, but we're not thinking.
Yes.
Well, see, this is the very, very close conflation that makes us feel like we did it.
Yeah.
We did what we needed to do.
Yeah,
like, we've done
close.
it.
Yeah.
It's so close, and this is what happens with entertainment. You know, we do a lot of, and we watch a lot of entertainment. It's an entertainment culture.
Yes.
But it's almost like that has made us feel like we're entertaining, but we're not.
Right.
We're receiving entertainment, and we are not entertaining questions, ideas, you know, other worldviews, whatever it is. Like, are we entertaining ourselves? Which is a funny expression, because like, are we ourselves entertaining?
Yes.
And it's funny because too, I think often like, well, I think there's something that is more dynamic about like, if you're going to start to seek wisdom out, like why do people even go to people who they think are wise? Right. It's because they have like, there's an attraction there, I think, for certain, but it's not to the glowing TV screen, it's to the glowing person, right? Like who's actually seeking out the wisdom. And so I think that's something that, you know, the show or whatever it is presented as a whole, like knowledge, right? But it is it kind of like allows you to think that you've done something, you know, that you, and but you know what, you really haven't. Now you might make something of that. You might take that,
you might take
and make it
want.
and take it in and ask some questions to yourself, or think about it, or be like, oh, like, how did that make me see my life in a different way, or problems I've been through, like how do I kind of see them in a new light because of what I saw.
Right.
So it doesn't take like a whole lot kind of to start to walk in the direction of like the entertaining the questions and the ideas.
Right.
It's
actively engaging.
Yeah, it's actively engaging, but I think a lot of times, and that's like, we were talking about McLuhan this afternoon, where he talks about like the different mediums, if they're hot, they're cold,
hot, cold,
and like the idea that the TV and things that are watched and the entertainment just kind of washes over us.
Yeah.
We don't really do much of our own active creating
right.
in that, and so
and that has a consequence, because it trains you to it trains you to think you're entertaining, or it trains you to think that good stuff just presents itself to you. All you got to do is hit
the play button. You just hit play.
Yeah, you don't have to play. You just have to hit play.
Yeah, you just hit play. You don't have to. You just press the easy button almost.
Right,
like
and play is associated with creativity,
with this kind of technological, right? Buttons, robots, like.
Well, knowledge presents itself as if you are wise, in the same way that entertainment presents itself as if you are entertaining.
Exactly.
And I like that move, because there does seem to be a deep link between the philosophical and the artistic, and the creative and the wise. They always tend to go together, and it's interesting to think that the way we do entertainment, that would take away, or because we outsource our ability to be entertaining, would simultaneously hinder or weaken our ability to entertain questions or to entertain wisdom. That's a very interesting line of thought. I like that you've done there, because it's like this movement from, and it's true what you say. It's also so similar. Like, that's why we get tricked.
Yes, we get tricked so much. We get tricked because, it's like, well, I'll just play the show, but we don't realize, like, we're not actually playing. We're not playing ourselves.
Yeah, that similarity is really big. It's like the difference between the truth and the absolute.
Exactly.
It's so similar,
it's so similar
close.
that you think, and that's why, unfortunately, we do a lot of the talking on boredom and stuff and things like that. But and I can remember too, like that we wouldn't watch a lot of TV as kids, but we'd get to watch like Thomas the Tank and like a couple things, and I remember just being like if I didn't, it's funny. It's almost like the more you kind of just outsourced your brain, like where you just sort of you didn't really engage too much, then you're more like when it was over, like the state, and then you're just like But then until you realize, like, it's funny, the days that I recall just not watching anything, I would, I just was just more. I never really had that moment, because you're like, now Mary-Lise and I are gonna like, go on a trip to Paris in our little imaginary airplane, and like, do you have your tickets? Do you have your passports? Did you pack your bags? And there's just so much more engagement there, and I think, we do, like, we want life to feel playful, right? Well, then we have to play too.
Well, you have to cultivate you have to cultivate something inside of you. Yeah, I actually have a theory that I have no evidence for, that like when video games had bad graphics, they actually taught imagination better than now, because the graphics are so good. When it's like Zelda's this little pixelated thing, you're trying to save the windfish on your Game Boy. You would then go out in the woods and be Zelda, right? Because you had to imagine it. But now, because the graphics are so good, you see it, so then it does it all. So anyway, I'm wondering if that's I kind of wonder actually I wonder actually if that's a reason why with kids there's this like they're turning to all these like silly these Minecraft where the graphics are terrible, and like the cell phone games. Yeah, I know. There's almost like in kids the imagination. It's almost like the imagination doesn't want the graphics to be too good. I don't know. I have no evidence of that. It's just something I've been thinking about. Because like kids now, when you get older, we don't want imagination anymore. We just want to crush it. So we want the graphics to be great. But kids almost have a subconscious knowing that they need to be entertaining themselves. They need to be imaginative themselves.
Maybe also kids are just like way smarter than us and wiser than us. And they're like, no, I'm not actually making a realistic mountain if it looks just like a mountain. They're like, I can't, what? Like, no human made the mountains, And so
that's hilarious.
So it's like, they're like, yeah, of course it has to be blocks. That's why it's Minecraft.
That's really hilarious.
I'll go visualize
like
me
that they actually are able to make a clearer separation between the world of the virtual and reality. They probably can, and we're just adults to go through school and get our hopes and dreams killed. No, but it's like, exactly, like, Marshall McLuhan, if I get it correct, I think TV's the cold medium because the brain doesn't have to be active, while books are the hot medium because the brain has to be active.
Gee, don't I wish which direction that
Yeah,
gradient
no, it's
went.
really it's easy to get backwards because
I know,
like
I'm
the
like,
TV
is
the TV hot because it's like doing everything for you, but I think it's relative to the activity of the brain. And if the McLuhan scholar is listening right now, just vomited. I'm sorry. I'm trying. Okay, this is hard. But no. So there's something about knowledge that is much colder, and there's something about wisdom that is much hotter. And if all of your technology, if all of your entertainment, and even your society, because you go to work and your boss tells you what to do or whatever, like there's less entrepreneurship. So if everything around you is more cold, well then yeah, where is wisdom to be found? Well, it ain't gonna be found. In fact, you've got to have created a socioeconomic order that implied a value system that makes anything hot, anything that turns your brain on, bad. Something you shouldn't be doing. So I think basically what's happened is anything that is a hot medium has a kind of system of values against it.
I'm so bad.
No, go.
I'm so awful.
No, do it.
Well, I really think that TV was warm and books were cold.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, because I think the thought was that there's more of because your brain, you can just kind of turn your brain off. Because, a lot of people will. They're like, I had such a long day. I just, get home. I can't even do anything but, veg and just, watch Netflix. It's like, there's something that just,
I feel like I went through a phase where I thought the TV was hot, and then someone corrected me, and I looked it up, and I was it's the brain.
I don't
know. No, that's what I'm saying. That's why the terms are, hard. Because it's like the TV feels warm.
Because there's something kind of you just sort of fall. It's hot. It's kind of there's something kind of
People are literally looking this up on Wikipedia, and we're going to see in the comments, Michelle won, Daniel, -50.
No, Lord knows you won.
No, I can never keep this up. But there's a difference between the hot and the cold.
But the only reason why I say that is because what I thought was there's something kind of that there's almost something hot in the sexy sense of TV. There's visual, it's graphics. It's you kind of feel woohoo. It's just there's something kind of just gets you warmed up about that. Versus
that's what I felt. Yes, that's so.
Versus a book, which don't get me wrong.
Yes.
It's just cold. It's flat. You have to actually open it up. You actually have to read. You have to take effort. You have to actually read something. Now, eventually, that'll get really hot.
This is what I felt.
Eventually,
this is what I thought, and that was my go-to. But I remember being wrong, and so I went the other way on it. Because exactly, books feel cold because they don't do any work for you. But I think it is that books are hot because your brain has to do more work.
Your brain's on fire.
Yeah, because your brain's on fire. I think it might be. But here's the part. Here's the thing. This is a great example. Because we could go to our cell phone right now and look it up and turn it into knowledge. But instead, we're going to leave it in the sphere of uncertainty, where we have to think through which it could be and why it could be cold or why it could be hot, which is a process of generating wisdom.
Gee, I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah, because the turning to the we've outsourced everything to looking on the phone.
100%.
Absolutely.
100%. It's literally just Trivial Pursuit.
People
are out there. People are out there
yeah.
just playing Trivial Pursuit with their conversation.
Oh yeah, that's the best part of Neil Postman's
look, if you're doing
act.
That with beers at at the pizza place, cool. But people are doing it just in their everyday conversation, which it can have a place. Everybody's looked up something on their phone, and that's fine. But I think that the only thing is there can be a risk of not really allowing the conversation to be as full.
It throws off the flow.
You know what I mean?
Then somebody's wrong. Somebody feels wrong because I don't know,
wrong, right?
and then so
you would say that.
Because then somebody's wrong, and then everyone's nervous as you quietly wait for the person to look up the facts. That's a knowledge society. In a wisdom society, you're going to go, oh, well, maybe it is hot. And you're going to think through, okay, maybe a book is hot because it's sexy.
You're less concerned exactly with,
if
it's
detail.
right on Google
yes.
versus, what do you think would be right in that?
Yes,
do you think a book would be hot or cold?
Yes, and it would be relative to if you're focusing on the medium or the book. Clearly, the book is cold in its medium. You don't
hold books and they're hot?
But that's warm? Right. Yeah.
I mean, I use them as space heaters, man.
Oh, do you? Well, that's, that works. I mean, if they're on fire, that would mean
what
you're
in a...
That's not how you read them. That's not how you read them. But there's something, but it's right here. The book is certainly cold in its medium. No books were harmed in this video. Is it a video if it's just audio with a still image on YouTube?
We're not burning anything.
Is it a video if it's a still image on YouTube? Maybe. So in this audio, no one was harmed in this thing. But But no, so you think, okay, the book in its medium is cold, but
Yeah.
what it does to the brain is hot, so I could see where McLuhan could put it either way, but you say a TV in its medium is hot because it's doing all the work for you and your brain is cold. So you could see
literally, it uses electricity. It like gets warm. Like put your hand on the back of an electronic. Maybe not these new plasma. I don't know what they are.
So you see, in a knowledge society where you're so concerned about getting the facts right, you don't think through the problem completely and see either way, which obviously, whatever McLuhan had, he's got there, it's one or the other. But being so concerned with that can throw off thinking and kind of throw you off. But you can see why you end up in a knowledge society, because you don't want to be wrong. It's so nerve-wracking to be wrong. It's like, I don't want to be the guy on this conversation who's saying books are the cold medium when they're really the hot, or vice versa. That's another reason wisdom dies.
Well, it could stifle conversation, because people like know that if they're going to say something, it could literally be fact-checked.
Well, that's what I was saying. Yeah,
it
probably will be fact-checked. I mean, everyone's on their phone all the time, so people are nervous about being wrong. They're nervous about it, and that feeds the ego, which we were talking with Cadell, puts us in truth, not the absolute, because no one wants to. Well, it was fun.
Please go watch the video with Dr. Last and Daniel.
He's awesome. I love Last and Dr. Last, and yeah, everyone's nervous. It's that paper Trivial, which is on Neil Postman's Subversive Act, where he talks about the structure of the classroom as a freaking trivia room. So you are learned to associate that an intelligent person is someone who is good at trivia. Because the teacher's at the front, they ask a random question, who can raise their hand first and answer it. So the medium, the structure of the class, says to you that a smart person is good at trivia. Well, if that's the case, all the social values are in terms of knowledge, not wisdom. And worse yet, your entire environment is telling you that you're wise in its technology, like we were saying at the beginning of this. And so technology is handed off to you. Your environment says to you that you're wise in its knowledge. You go to school, in the medium of the structure of the classroom says that knowledge is all that matters, because it's all structured like trivia. And then you're wondering why everyone is crazy. Why people aren't able to interact with people they disagree with, why people are not empathetic, why politics are so insane, why family structures are a problem, why you have depression, mental health, and all these different things. Because all people have is knowledge.
Well, the thing is, too, knowledge, while it can, help with things, of course, it's because it becomes this trivia,
right,
it can also become trivial.
Yeah, that's what that is.
And that
exactly
word,
right.
which the paper is so good about. And also, Neil Postman is amazing.
Neil Postman's unbelievable.
I love that.
He's hilarious too.
He's so funny.
Yeah, he's
and
hilarious.
he wrote all of his books on like a notepad.
So great. He's
so
amazing.
Great.
Yeah, he's
like
really great. It's just that the subjects he covered were outstanding, and everyone knows about amusing ourselves to death. But his amusing ourselves to death is wonderful. But his education books are stunning.
He's got and his technology.
Yes.
Super amazing. Go read Neil Postman.
Yeah, but trivia becomes trivial.
It becomes trivial, and nobody really. We always kind of think about trivial as like dismissive, and that reminds me of your talk. Was a part 2 with Cadell, Ebert, and Adlin.
Philosophy of Lack.
Yes, the philosophy of lack, where you're talking about like how we've kind of dismissed like it's nothing.
Yeah, it's
like,
nothing.
So basically, like that idea, it's trivial can just basically our language for things and our orientation towards things is going to impact how important we make it. How important do we understand the importance of what we're like learning, what we're encountering, etc. And the thing is that knowledge, while it is important, if we don't understand that it has to be in the web, like the atmosphere of wisdom.
Yes.
Okay, then it can also just become trivial.
But that's a great joke. Like that's the whole joke. So what has happened is everything now is knowledge, and everything is trivial. Like everything is knowledge. Our relationship to knowledge is trained by school, which makes it trivia. And gradually and slowly it comes to feel trivial. And so we surround ourselves with knowledge, and then we set ourselves up to feel like it's all trivial, and then we wonder why we have, as Bernanke calls it, the meaning crisis.
Yeah, and the thing is too, I don't think people feel as much like this when they learn, I'm learning this, like when I went to Spain and I'm learning Spanish because I can actually communicate with my host mom and all of the other people that I'm around. It's like and Marilise and I promised each other we would not speak English together while we were in Spain.
That was very wise. That was
we
wise.
were only going to speak Spanish together, and that was great. That was very helpful actually in learning the language. But I think it's just so funny because it's like job training doesn't usually feel trivial because you actually need it,
Yes.
like for what you're going to be doing.
Yes.
And it's just kind of this kind of really interesting thing about wisdom where I feel like wisdom is actually extremely needed, but it also often presents itself as not necessary to look into. You know what I mean? Like that's
Absolutely.
why people don't. That's why it's harder to make yourself actually go and read or learn or whatever beyond what you're kind of being
It reminds
given.
me, I guess, Johannes and Daniel, they were talking about how we don't have Zerubbabel, we don't have the ability to judge sufficiency anymore. Like when this is sufficient, when we can stop. Capitalism doesn't want you to be able to judge when you've consumed enough. Capitalism doesn't want you to be able to judge what's sufficient. It wants you to keep consuming and to keep going. There's incentive in the structure for you not to develop the ability to judge sufficiency. But of course, if you can't judge sufficiency, you can't be happy. You can't actually have a life that's not always consuming and never fulfilled. Literally, if you cannot judge sufficiency, you cannot be fulfilled. Those things go together, the ability to judge. Well, similarly, if you don't have wisdom, you can't judge what knowledge is useful, what knowledge is bad, what knowledge to use, how to use it. You really can't make judgments about your knowledge. It's all just a fragment short against ruin, as Eliot put it. It's all just these glass beads, Herman Hesse, and you can't organize it. And the other thing too is, if it is true that all men naturally desire to know, as Aristotle put it, well then there's something about us that wants to consume all knowledge. Paradoxically, without wisdom, we don't know when to judge that this knowledge is sufficient, this knowledge is useful, this knowledge is good, and so we can't organize it. So we try to consume everything, and then it all becomes trivial. It all becomes irrelevant. It all becomes meaningless. Like, why is it why in the age of the internet, like when everyone has all the information in the world, they never have to have nothing. They can be learning all the time. Meaning crisis. Why? Because what ends up happening is without the ability to judge what knowledge is good knowledge from bad knowledge, then it all just becomes knowledge, data, information, fragments. It all just falls vanity. Of the reading of books there is no end. I guess in Ecclesiastes, vanity, vanity. It's all nothing, and so wisdom gives you the ability. Wisdom actually saves knowledge. That's kind of what's funny, is that wisdom saves knowledge.
That's so...
But knowledge has a tendency to kill wisdom. So knowledge has a tendency to kill wisdom. Knowledge needs wisdom to survive. So knowledge kills the thing that keeps it alive. And I mean, it's that irony. Irony is the fabric of reality.
I'm just diagramming in my head, these little doodles.
That's what it does. I mean, well, likewise, if all we do is hit play...
Yep.
If we don't have the ability to be playful, if we can only be entertained, if we can't be entertaining, well then no one is creative. And so no one's going to be frickin' making shows on Netflix that you can hit play and watch. If you outsource all of your ability to be entertaining to entertainment, then there ceases to be entertainment.
Yes.
This mistake that we're describing has a self-consuming mechanism.
Yes.
If knowledge kills wisdom, and without wisdom, knowledge dies.
Yes.
So there's a self-consuming mechanism. You could look at the story of Jesus. Mankind kills Jesus, whom without mankind is doomed. And fortunately he comes back from the dead. But the mechanism there is a self-consumption, and so failure to understand the necessity of cultivating wisdom is the death of knowledge. We have to overcome the temptations of knowledge to forsake wisdom to save both. It's that C.S. Lewis principle. If you put first things first, you get second things also.
Yes.
But if you put second things first, you lose both.
Yes.
And so we need to put wisdom at the forefront to save knowledge. And if we continue to put knowledge at the forefront, then we'll lose both knowledge and wisdom.
Yes. It's funny because, like I said with the children comment, they really are... I think they begin with the seeds of wisdom. They begin with the questions. I mean, and so it's kind of like it's I think we always have to keep the questions alive and well, because that is what ultimately always affords the seeking. It's not an end point, it's a continuation, it's a journey, it's a process.
Well, I think it was St. Augustine who thought of Adam and Eve as children. And what was their fall? They ate from the tree of knowledge. The children are depicted as being wise. They have communion with God. You can't be any wiser than that. And they trade wisdom for knowledge.
So thanks, guys.
Thank you all for listening. So cultivate wisdom.
Thank you for listening.
Wisdom is good. We need to save knowledge with wisdom, or we'll lose both. And again, the world is not going to present you with wisdom like it will cars that will, in its very appearance, make it self-evident of why it's important. So you just have to keep the faith. And if you do, in the same way, like if you plant a seed, you may not see it for a really long time. Then one day it will sprout.
Yes, well, if you'd like to read the paper itself, it'll be on Medium. So you can go to our Medium page. And of course, you can always just find us on Instagram,
Facebook. Anchor, etc., Twitter, all these different things. So thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for your time.